Okay, everybody. I'm gonna put this stupid thing back on. So laying on your back with your feet extended, hands palms down, and maybe pick up your head for just a moment, lengthen the back of your neck. You can also pick up your elbows and let the pointy parts go out to the sides. Letting your back widen. And just take a breath or two. And begin by observing the angle of the feet. What part of your heels, what part of your calves are touching? See if you can sense the space between the behind the back of your knees and the mat. Is it a lot? Is it a little? You wouldn't want your knees to be absolutely flat. That would indicate hyperextension. But neither do you want them really popping up off the floor. Allowing your awareness to come to the pelvis. Just briefly, let's observe if you have more weight on one butt cheek or the other, or if your pelvis is tipping up or tipping down. If it's tipping forward normally, your tailbone is going to be slightly pointing down, and you're going to have a lot of space between your lumbar spine and the mat. If, on the other hand, you're sort of a tucker, where you're tucking your pelvis under, your tailbone would be slightly pointed up toward the ceiling, and your lumbar spine would be really flat back. Just observe whatever sort of is true for you right now in this moment. And then see if you can observe where the bottom of your rib cage connects to the top of the lumbar spine. This is what we call the lumbar dorsal hinge, the LD hinge. And it's right about there on the spine where your psoas is hooking on the inner side of the spine. So when we get a tightened psoas, it's going to yank your spine forward and the whole pelvis will tip forward. But just again, see if you could sort of sense where that spot is. And then let's begin to really observe how the rib cage is laying. So ideally, your rib cage would be flat, but you might be actually rotating to the right or to the left. And you might observe that by sort of sensing what you're doing with your shoulder blades, your shoulders, maybe even feeling the erector spinae, the long muscle that runs from the back of the skull down to the sacrum, and feeling whether or not you have more weight on one side of the spine than you do on the other. If that's true, you're probably rolling toward that weighted side. And you might also feel more weight on one shoulder blade or the other. That again would indicate that you have a corkscrew, you're twisting. And then you might also try to sense where your shoulder blades are relative to your head. Is one higher up, lower down? Are they both pulling up? Are they popping up off the floor? Just observe as clearly as you can. And let's take a moment and image. So you have your rib cage, it's attaching on the bottom to the lumbar spine. And at the top, it meets the cervical spine, the neck. And the ribs come off the spine in the back, off the spinous processes, those little things that project off the vertebra. And so that, of course, makes your rib cage more stable, but also less flexible than, say, the cervical spine or the lumbar spine, which have a lot of movement. On top of your rib cage in the back, you have your shoulder blades. And ideally, parallel to the spine is the medial edge of your shoulder blade. And by parallel, I mean that the top corner and the bottom corner are both sort of more or less equidistant from the spine. If you've got something else going on, the bottom might be more away from the spine than the top, or some other variation. Coming off the spine, you have in the back, you have a little protrusion off the top that has a hollow at the end, or not a hollow, but a sort of a shallow dish. And that's snuggling up to your upper arm bone, the knob of your humerus. And then in the front, snuggling in up against that upper arm bone is the end of your collarbone or clavicle. And all that's woven together with soft tissue. And both the collarbone and the shoulder blade are just resting on the rib cage, one in front, one in back. And together with the upper arm bone, they form like a yoke. So you could think about it as this yoke, which ideally is sitting really evenly on top of your rib cage, but it might actually not be so even. It might be tipping in. That would be true if you're one of those people whose head is forward and whose collarbone is sinking onto the rib cage. Or it could be tipping the opposite direction, in which case that lumbar dorsal hinge is probably really popping up off the floor. So try to visualize all that for just a moment, and then try to check in with your own self. These are kinds of hard things to sense and feel, but do your best. And then also, let's sense the cervical spine where it joins your rib cage, the thoracic spine. And is that resting on the mat? Or is the neck sort of dragging the top couple vertebra of your rib cage up off the floor? Take your hands and check it out. Take your fingers and check it out. And if you put your fingers on the side, 2.5 or 1.5 to 2 fingers would be kind of a good amount of space. More than that would indicate you've got a lot of tension. And less than that wouldn't be so good either. That would be a flat neck. So just check it out. And now we're gonna bring our knees up so our feet are standing, and using your thigh muscles, lift your lower spine and wrap it, just loosening up the pelvis. We're gonna do a couple quick moves just to kind of free up the bottom of the spine. So set it back down. And then just let your knees go to the right and up and over to the left, rolling across your butt. And just gently waking up the lumbar spine, feeling those vertebrae pulling apart ever so slightly, giving a little more room. And if you can, try to focus your awareness at the top of the lumbar spine, at that LD hinge. What's going on with the rib cage? How much is it being drawn into that movement? If you can, image the way the lumbar spine sort of dangles from the bottom of the rib cage, and then attached to the bottom of it is the pelvis, like a pendulum. And then stop. And we're going to do one more movement here. So you're going to tip your tailbone up and roll up to the top rim of your sacrum. Try to locate that if you can. And then release and roll back down the sacrum, letting the tailbone begin to tip down and bringing the top of the sacrum up off the floor and the lumbar spine, and probably the bottom of your rib cage. And release, letting the rib cage sink and then rolling back up. Do that a few times, being as precise as you can, really trying to have a sense of where the top of the pelvis is, the bottom of the lumbar spine, where the lumbar spine attaches to the thoracic spine. And then the next time you're rolling back up, come to the top rim of the sacrum and lift just L7 and put it back down. Did I say L7? Sorry. The bottom vertebra. And then as you roll back down, coming back up, rolling back up, lifting the bottom two vertebra and setting them back down, rolling back down, coming back up, the bottom three, and then setting them down one at a time. And rolling back up, the bottom four vertebra. And then the bottom five. And then finally all the way up to the bottom, to that LD hinge, all six vertebrae off the floor, and really sense, okay, where am I in my back? And then releasing and rolling back down. And then just do a few more moves where you're lifting the whole lumbar spine one at a time. And then come back down and relax. Take a moment and image those structures, the pelvis, the lumbar spine with its slight arch, the rib cage, hopefully flat, the cervical spine. And now we're going to go up to the top of this whole thing. We're going to start by just noticing, just roll your head just side to side quickly a couple times, then just stop and sort of try to observe what part of your head is really resting on the mat. Is it more toward the base of the skull, more toward the crown of the head? And then let your chin come up toward the ceiling so you're sliding up on the back of your head toward the crown. And just observe what happens in your cervical spine, in your neck. Should be a lot of curve. And then slide back down toward the base of the skull as far as you can go and observe that. Now your neck is really long, but you probably have tension in your throat. So find the sweet spot where you're as far down toward the base of your skull as you can go without creating any tension in the front of your throat. That's the sweet spot. And just observe, where is that? And is this where you habitually live? Or do you habitually live someplace else? So when I say neck long, what I mean is find that sweet spot. Now, let's start by imaging our cervical spine, our neck. So at the very top, you have the round atlas. That would be C1. And then under that, you have C2, which is a more normal vertebra. It's round. It has two little knobs off either side to which a bunch of fascia attaches. Spinous processes, we call those. But the second vertebra also has another thing, which is like a little upward projection that's kind of like a finger tip that goes right through the atlas, C1, and your skull is resting on it like a dashboard bobble toy. And the back of your skull is woven to the atlas by a bunch of little ligaments. Just gently roll your head to the right and then back to the middle. Roll it to the left and see if you can sense that. Now, obviously, a lot of other neck muscles are involved, but also bring your chin down, bring your chin up, do that a few times. And that might make it a little easier to sense those ligaments. And stop. Now we're going to do some things with the eyes and the tongue. So the tongue, actually, via the hyoid muscles, the tongue stands on the hyoid bone in the center of that horseshoe, which is your lower jaw. And it's woven to the jaw by hyoid muscles. And also on the back part of the hyoid bone, it connects right to that spot where the atlas is. So we're gonna, so if your tongue is tense, your jaw is tight, it's gonna affect the back of your neck. So we're gonna work with that. So start by pressing your tongue out and then release and let it go back and relax. And do that maybe 20 times, sensing and feeling as you do that what happens in the back of the neck where the atlas is. Observe any sensations you might feel in the whole shoulder girdle. And let your jaw relax. And by jaw relaxed, what I mean is your teeth should not be touching. Your tongue is resting in the bottom of the mouth. And take it and run it along the outside of the teeth as if you were trying to clean the surface of your teeth. Start at the top left, go across the upper teeth to the right, and then down and around the right lower teeth, and then just circling your tongue in your mouth. Try to keep your jaw as relaxed as you can. And then circle the opposite direction. And again, observe the back of the neck as well. Stop and relax. Let your jaw relax, your tongue relax. Maybe adjust your head, just again, finding the sweet spot. And now, even though unlike the tongue, where there's actually a soft tissue direct connection, the eyes also influence the atlas quite a bit, even though it's a much more indirect connection via all the facial muscles. But let's play with that as well. So, rolling your eyes, imagine your eyes are like greased, the back of the eyeballs are greased, and you're looking up, looking to the right, looking down, looking to the left, just rolling your eyes in the socket. You can do this with your eyes open or closed, but don't strain the eye muscles. And stop, letting the eye sink into the hammock of the eye muscles. Now imagine that you can shoot your eyes out beyond your cheekbones, look to the right, look to the left, and then pull them back in and shoot them out right, left, pull them back in, and just do that. Again, strain the eye muscles. Let it be soft and observe. What do you feel in the back of the neck at the atlas? This is really important if you're sitting at a computer or doing some kind of work where you're looking a lot. Now relax, letting the eyes sink into the hammock of the eye muscles. Then rolling your head to the right, leading with the eyes and the tongue. Rolling the head to the left, leading with the eyes and the tongue. Just go from side to side and observe how far into your upper back do you feel that movement. Be sure your elbows are out, your back is wide. Then lift your head, lengthen your neck, and letting your arms come straight up in the air as if you were holding a beach ball and mobilizing the muscles at the very bottom of the shoulder blade, the lower trapezius, the lats. Just using those muscles, press the hands up as if you wanted to touch the ceiling and then release and let it drop. And press up and drop. And really focus on the soft tissue between the medial border of your shoulder blades and the spine. Such a hard spot to get at. And you can play with, as you're doing this, rotating your hands in space. So the palms are facing your head, palms are facing away from you. Palms are facing each other or the reverse. Observe, how does that change the sensation? How does that change what you're getting? Then stop. Bend your elbows, clasping them lightly with your fingertips. And let your head and arms go to the right and then up and over to the left. Feeling as you roll across the erector spinae, the long muscles on either side of the spine. Feeling the turning of the rib cage. Imaging. What are you doing? How is the arm changing in relationship to the shoulder blade as you go through this range of movement? Then stop. Arms come back by your side, elbows out, back wide, neck long, and relax. Now imagine you have a string attached to your breastbone, and that string is pulling your breastbone, and feel that part of your spine opposite the breastbone coming up and then drop and then up and drop, and just keep doing that, feeling the way the shoulder blades are drawn up on the medial edge and also toward the spine a bit, and then dropping. Also sitting down to the hinge. Then stop and just rest. Images the yoke of the shoulder girdle, the collarbone, the shoulder blades, the upper arm bone. Slide your hands down toward your feet, feeling the way the yoke presses down, and then release and let them pop back up and slide down and release and down and release, feeling the way the shoulder blade slides across the back of the rib cage up and down, the way the collarbone depresses into the rib cage, up and then down. And then stop. Lengthen your neck. Imaging once again how the upper arm bone is sort of nestling against the end of the collarbone and the spine coming off the scapula. Then just let your hands float up and over your head, dropping the hands onto the floor if you can, and sense and feel your spine. Take a deep breath and then release it and see if you can let your spine imprint. And then let the arms come float back up and come back down. And then up, trying to keep the rib cage more or less flat, dropping the hands over the head and then coming back down. Now, you may or may not be able to keep your lower rib cage flat. Just do what feels good. Now, for some people, this is a super hard movement. And if that's true for you, make the movement easier. So let's wait. And now, when your hands are by your sides again, we're going to start that movement. But as your hands float up, use your thigh muscles and let your pelvis lift. So you're coming up, and then your hands are over the head. And this should be much easier. Make sure your neck is long. Then, as the hands begin to float back up, let your bottom sink toward the mat, and then lifting the pelvis, coming up, and letting your butt sink as your hands come down. Just doing that. Maybe do that a few times, 8 or 9 times. And image what you're doing here. So your spine is becoming like a straight line. And then as your bottom sinks, it changes. Really try to sense into the LD hinge, into where the cervical spine joins the upper rib cage, C7, C1. And then the next time your butt's on the floor, relax. And without doing anything in particular, leave your pelvis still. Let your hands float up. And just notice if that movement is any easier. And then stop, relax. And once again, let's image the rib cage. So we have 12 thoracic vertebrae, and the bottom two ribs are what we call floaters. In other words, the other ribs curve around and form the rib cage. The two floaters, the 11th one sort of comes around and it's pretty close to the front where it terminates. If you take your fingers and run them along from, sort of where your breastbone ends, run them along the curve of your rib cage, just tracing that, you know, what would be your 10th rib, you're going to reach a little knob when you get sort of toward the sides in the front. That's the tip of the 11th rib. And then if you trace along the bottom of that, you're going to get into the sides, and there's the floating, the tip of the 12th rib. So what we're going to do now is curl our hands lightly in the fist and place them under your rib cage. Under your armpits at the top of the rib cage. And for ladies, you might have to sort of like scoot down a tiny bit toward the mat so that you're not pressing on your breast tissue. And keeping your elbows on the mat, you're going to roll your head to the right, sliding the right elbow down and the left up, and then back to the middle. Then slide the left elbow down, the right up, and back to the middle. And do that once or twice, really sensing and feeling how the upper rib cage is bending, and also what you feel in the bottom of the ribs. But try to really sense the top of the rib cage as much as you can. Try to sense that top vertebra. And then move your fingers down or your hands down like one width, just one rib. And then do the same thing once or twice on each side. Then move your fingers down again. And just keep doing that, sort of sensing and feeling the movement of the vertebra as you go down the rib cage, trying to really sense each one as best you can. And this is a great way to kind of get at some of those hard to reach spots on the spine, especially those spots between the shoulder blades. Coming down again, just going down. And when you get to the floating ribs, you're going to get a ton of movement in the bottom of the rib cage. And when you get all the way to the bottom, lift your head, lengthen your neck, let your arms be by your side, elbows out, and very gently roll your head to the right, roll it to the left, sensing the atlas. And then just keep rolling your head gently and see if you can shift your awareness down to C2, C3, and 4, 5, and 6, and 7, and then stop. Slide your right leg out and wrap the back of the right knee. And then stop and flex your foot, just pressing the knee down and stretching all the way up to the floating rib, and then release. Slide your left leg down. Wrap the back of the left leg. Do the same thing. Flex and stretch and release. Take a breath. Imaging your body as you're laying there and how as the breath goes all the way down deep into the pelvic floor, all the segments, the rib cage, the neck, the head, the pelvis, it's all just breathing and releasing with the breath. As you breathe in, they pull apart, they get a little more space between them. And as you exhale, everything releases, the heels, the calves, the buttocks, the lower ribs. Trying to sense the movement of the breath up and down the spine lengthening as you breathe in and releasing as you exhale. Letting the breath be like a guide. Namaste.
Namaste.
Thank you.
Oh,
So good.
ah. Ooh. Lightheaded.
Really.
So do you guys connect, sense those,
I like those, the new ones with the, the.
oh, the ribs?
Yeah.
That's a really powerful one. Ah, all right.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Explore that as much as you can. The more differentiated you can get with these vertebrae, the more you're going to learn how to like, oh, there's that spot I can't get to. Sorry, I should put this back on. We're all vaccinated anyway, but all right. Goodbye, my friends.
See you next week.
See you on
Thanks.
Friday.
So yeah, I can hardly wait.
Bye. Thanks.